that is here. Let me first appreciate the vote of confidence for me to chair this meeting today, honorable members. Without any waste of time, I would like to maybe if we can fly the agenda of the meeting. Oh, thank you very much. Thank you very much. May we kindly, do we have any apologies today? If you can just note them if we've got any. Before we give to the department, can we note if there are any apologies?
Yes, Chair, there is an apology from the chairperson of the committee who is currently abroad. And I've got another apology from the DG. He's currently monitoring infrastructure projects in KZN, but he's joining us, even though he might have some challenges in terms of connection. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Let's note those apologies. I think without any waste of time, we can proceed to the business of the day, which is the briefing on the 2022 National Senior Certificate Examination outcome by the department. I don't know if either minister or deputy minister here so that they can take us through, or the department.
Thank you so much and good morning, colleagues. My name is Regina Mhaule, the Deputy Minister of Basic Education. Want to take this opportunity and thank the committee for inviting us together with Umalusi to come and present on the matric results, which I think is a bit overdue, because we're supposed to have presented somewhere early February, but it's better late than nothing. So we really appreciate and want to pay our deepest condolences to the members of the select committee for losing one of its outstanding members, Comrade Gillion, who was very instrumental in this committee.
Recording in progress.
Oh my God, I was talking, it was not recorded. Yeah, I'm saying as a Department of Basic Education, we want to pay our deepest condolences to the select committee and NCOP in general for losing its member, Honorable Gillian, who was always present in meetings and kept us on our toes most of the time, but in a very humble way. We'll miss her humility and respect, though firm. So good
morning, ma.
Good morning. Sorry for the ambush.
Oh, no problem, no problem.
Chairperson, is it the same meeting?
Oh, my apologies. I did not.
Oh, okay. Thank you. So we are here with Umalusi. We are with the team of basic education led by the DG, with Dr. Rakometsi from Umalusi, Dr. Polia. In the event the DG might get cut, the other leaders are here in the meeting. But for now, Chair, with your permission, we can allow the DG to take us through. They will know how they present. They've said themselves. DG.
Thank you, Honorable Deputy Minister, Honorable Chair, and Honorable Members, the Chair of Umalusi, the CEO, the senior management team of Umalusi and DBE. DM, without any waste of time, what usually happens is that we start with our presentation, and then Umalusi follows after We are done with our presentation. And as you correctly pointed out, Deputy Minister, our presentation will be led by Dr. Rufus Polia, together with Sister Priscilla and Dr. Similan. Dr. Polia.
Thank you, DG. Am I
Sorry,
audible?
Deputy Minister. Coincidentally, I'm in Mapumulo, which happens to be the hometown of Dr. Polia Stenga. So I'm serving his area today. That's why he's got to take the baton in full, Deputy Minister. It's just on a lighter note, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Okay.
Dr. Polia.
No, thank you, DG Jan. Now I'm homesick already, Deputy Minister. I'd hope that I could be with the DG. But thank you, DG, and good morning to the Honorable Acting Chairperson. Good morning to our Deputy Minister, and good morning to the Chair of Umalusi Council, the CEO of Umalusi, and all honorable members present. This is indeed a special opportunity for us to share the results of the learners in terms of the 2022 NSC examination. And I'm going to try and, as the DG would always say, hit the punchline. Simply because I know that we have a very long presentation, but our time is limited. And Acting Chairperson, if I could be given an indication as to how much of time we have, so that we have 138 slides, so that I can structure the presentation accordingly, Honorable Chairperson.
I think by at least 11:40, you should have done the presentation so that members can have a chance to engage the presentation.
Okay, so that would be for both the DBE and the Umalusi presentation. And thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. And I think the important point, and I'm going to go quite fast, and thanks to the Secretariat for assisting us with flighting the presentation. The 2022 exam, like all examinations, is an important barometer of how the system is performing. And even though this comes a little bit late, but I think it is important that this committee looks at the performance of the system through the eyes of the 2022 NSC examination results. This is the outline of the presentation, and I think the important point to be made, which is the next slide, slide number 4, is that the basic education system is certainly a system on the rise. And if there was any doubt, I think that doubt would have been dispelled by the fact that we've seen this kind of improvement in the performance despite COVID, despite load shedding, and the other challenges that our learners may have experienced. Now, Honorable Chairperson, in terms of whatever we do, we always foreground and we take our lead from the National Development Plan, which talks about the highest quality education being provided to our learners. And this must be measured through our international standardized tests. And I think if one looks at the standardized tests in terms of TIMS as well as PEARLS, there is indication that we've started at a low base and we are moving forward. So it's not just the NSC results that confirm that we are a system on the rise, it's our international standardized tests that also confirm the same. In terms of the next slide, we just talk a little bit about the indicators of performance on slide number 7. And as I indicated, the National Senior Certificate is possibly the most reliable indicator because it is a census study. All learners take the examination, so you know exactly how all learners are performing at that level. But we are in the process of establishing our own systemic evaluation study, which has already been conducted. The data has been collected, and we should be able to present a report from the systemic evaluation program, possibly sometime later this year, in terms of how our learners are performing at grades 3, 6, and 9. And I think the committee and its members are also aware that we are in the process of establishing the general education certificate, which will look at a standardized assessment at the end of grade 9. So as a system, we are looking at more reliable indicators of performance throughout the system, but also looking at indicators at strategic points. Now, before we move further, we're going to look at the size and scope of the sector. And I'm not going to spend too much of time. I think we can skip over these slides. We are aware of the fact that we are a system servicing 13 billion learners across all grades and across all provinces. We're looking at a total of 450,000 educators. And the next slide, which I want to focus on, is the NSC promotional requirements. And that would be slide number 13. And the reason I want to spend some time on this particular slide, before we talk about the performance of the system, we need to understand what exactly does the NSC mean. The NSC is a qualification, but there are different types of qualifications that a learner may attain. And we have admission to bachelor field of study, admission to diploma field of study, admission to higher certificate, and what is referred to as the basic national senior certificate. Now, almost, or rather, let's say, more than 60% of our learners attain admission to bachelor field of study and an admission to diploma field of study. Now, if you look at the admission to the bachelor field of study at university, learners must obtain at least 40% in the home language, must obtain at least 50% in 4 other subjects, and 30% in the language of learning and teaching, and 30% in 1 other subject. So in the main, in order to obtain admission to bachelor studies, a learner must obtain 4 subjects at a 50% pass requirement. The diploma, on the other hand, the learner must obtain at least 40% in the home language and at least 40% for 3 other subjects. And the reason I'm pointing this out is that there's been a lot of criticism leveled against the department that we are setting a low threshold of 30%. Now, what I'm pointing out is that most of our learners are attaining either admission to bachelor's, admission to diploma, and a large number are higher certificate, where the minimum requirement is 40%. So the 30% that is there is merely to cater for learners who cannot make the minimum threshold of 40%. And we are also aware of the fact that a learner may be good in 5 of the 7 subjects or 6 of the 7 subjects and may not be good at 1 subject. So the pass at 30% allows the learner to pass that 1 subject only at 30%. But in the main, the learner is passing the rest of his subjects at either at 40, 50, or 60. So it's to allow learners to obtain an NSC and not be held back simply because they may be underperforming in 1 subject. And I think as a system, we are continuously monitoring performance at 40%, at 50%, and even higher. So it's not that we're setting the bar at a very low level. So that, I thought, was an important point. Moving to background and context, which is the next slide, I think we're all aware that this class was subjected to COVID over the 2-year period. And we sometimes think that this class bore the brunt of COVID in the sense that they were in grade 10 and in grade 11, during the peak of COVID. But we will see later that despite these impediments, this class has really done the entire country proud. So these are some of the factors that confronted these learners. And as a department, we had to trim the ATP, the annual teaching plan in grade 10 and 11. We amended the assessment program. And all of these initiatives were there to assist learners in terms of being able to cope with the limited time. And I think I've covered much of what is on the next slide, on slide 16. And all indications have been that despite the fact that this class has faced the brunt of COVID, they were the strongest cohort. And this is shown by the fact that if you look at their performance in grade 10 and 11, they performed better than the similar cohorts when they were in grade 10 and grade 11. Now, moving on to the next slide, slide number 17, is also an important, what is the number of learners that started in grade 1, and what is the number of learners that progressed through the system up to grade 12? Now, we are constantly being criticized with regard to the throughput. And I must say that our throughput is improving, particularly over the last 2 years. And if you look at the numbers, and we look at the blocks that are shaded in orange, if you look at the numbers, they are fairly consistent and stable. And up to grade 10, we still have 1.1 million learners, even though there may be slight drops along the way. Our biggest drops occur in grade 11 and in grade 12. But I must say that between grade 11 and grade 12, we found that the throughput and the number of learners moving from grade 11 to grade 12 has increased over the last 2 years, simply because we've changed the assessment protocol, which is now more appropriate for learners, more school-based, and as a result, more learners are now making it into grade 12. So our throughput is being constantly monitored, and we're also looking at certain grades where there may be a higher repeater. For example, at grade 4, we also have a higher repetition rate at grade 10, and we can explain why there's a higher repetition rate at these points. For example, in grade 4, because of the transition in terms of language, in terms of grade 10, a higher repetition rate, simply because in grade 10, that's where learners are making their subject choices, and that impacts on their performance. So our throughput is improving, but throughput must always be looked at in conjunction with the retention. And I think this particular slide, slide 18, explains the difference between throughput rate versus pass rate, because I think in the public domain, there's some confusion about throughput rate. Throughput rate, just to reiterate, is the number of learners or the rate at which learners progress through the schooling system from grade 1 to grade 12, while pass rate is the percentage of learners that satisfy the pass requirement at a specific grade, and in this case, it would be at the end of grade 12. As a system, we've been accused that our pass rate is not the 80.1, but it is lower simply because some of the commentators and individuals were looking at the number that entered grade 1 and looking at the number that passed. Now, that may be a fact, but that is the throughput rate, which we are aware of and which we are managing and which we are saying is steadily improving. Moving on to the numbers enrolled on the next slide, slide number 20. And here I think we are seeing a significant improvement in the number that enrolled, which also points to an improved throughput. If you look at it in 1994, I mean, which is a significant point in our history, you had 495,000 learners enrolling for the grade 12 exam, but that has increased by close to 300,000 to 752,000. So we certainly a system on the rise. And if you move on to the next slide, we look at the part-time figures, and our part-time figures took a drop in 2020 because of COVID, but what we are seeing now is an increase from 117,000 in 2020 to 168,000. So we're getting back in terms of our part-time learners. And our part-time learners will be learners that wrote matric previously, but are repeating and wanting to improve. On the next slide, we compare our 2021 numbers with the 2022 numbers, and this is being done per province. And if you look at it across all provinces, numbers have improved in 2022. So the overall increase in terms of number entered from 733,000 to 752,000. And the only province that had a slight decrease of 2,253 is KwaZulu-Natal. And with the large number that KwaZulu-Natal presents on an annual basis, and in 2022, they presented 173,000. So the drop of 2,000 is insignificant. So generally, one can say that there's been an increase across all provinces in terms of the numbers taking this examination. On this particular slide, we compare, which is the next slide, we compare the number that entered versus the number that wrote, because this is also very important. Now, here we are saying that in the case of, this is the part-time, and maybe on this particular slide, sorry, my apologies there, slide number 22 looks at the important observation that 752,000 of the learners entered in grade 12, 725 of them, or 725,000 finally wrote. So only 21,000 candidates were absent. And the big decline there would be in the case of KZN, which I've already explained. And on the next slide, we look at the difference between part-time candidates in 2021 per province and the numbers in 2022. And if you look at the numbers that wrote, 96,000 in 2021 and 109,000 in 2022. So that again shows that we had more learners pitching up to write the exam as part-time candidates, which I mentioned earlier that there was a slight drop. On this particular slide, we look at the boy learners versus the girl learners. This has been an important imperative, promoting the girl learner. And if you look at the last figure on the bottom right corner, we have 56.2% of our learners being female learners, 43.8% of our learners being male learners. Again, it shows that in totality, we have more girl learners, 422,000 of them compared to the 329,000 of the boy learner. Looking at the enrollments in terms of home languages, if you compare it to previous years, again, what we're seeing is an increase in numbers across all home languages, a slight drop in the case of isiZulu for the reason that I explained earlier in terms of the overall drop that we had in the case of isiZulu. In the case of the other subjects, this is just a selection of subjects, not all subjects. We're also seeing an improvement, but in 3 subjects, and these are your commercial subjects, your BCM subject, where we're seeing a drop. And this is a trend that we are working hard to arrest, because these are subjects that are needed by the business sector. And therefore, we are monitoring this closely. And I think the other trend that we're also monitoring closely is the divide between maths and maths literacy. And we want more of our learners to be taking maths. This is our numbers in terms of the technologies. Our numbers are still low. If you look at, for example, if you look at mechanical technology, we're on 2,445. We have a higher number in terms of electrical technology on 6,000, but this is way below where we want to get to in terms of our technology subjects, and much effort is being devoted in terms of strengthening our 3-stream model so that more learners can move into the vocational subject, because that would be where their interest lies and where they could perform better. And obviously, this is what the country needs at the moment. Another very important subject that we are monitoring and supporting is South African Sign Language, where we had 210 learners, and our numbers have almost doubled. If you look at it since 2021, we were on 128, we're now on 210. So we are doing a lot in terms of supporting our learners with special needs. Looking at progress learners are those learners that do not satisfy the requirements for promotion into grade 12. And because they would be spending more than 4 years in a phase, they get promoted into grade 12. And this number is decreasing. In 2021, it was 61,000, it's now 52,000. So this again is a positive, which shows that learners are now being able to be promoted into grade 12 on their own strength, on their own performance, rather than being progressed. And we're hoping that we will see a further decline in progress numbers in 2023 until we get to a point where no learner needs to be progressed and all learners will be able to move into grade 12 based on their own potential and their own performance. On the next slide, we look at the age of learners that are in grade 12. This is a very important indicator because we want most of our learners to be able to complete grade 12 by age 19. And if you look at this particular slide, where we compare 2021 with 2022, you'll find that most of our learners are in the age category of either 17, 18, or 19. And what we want to decrease is the 20, 21, and those that are older, that are still in the schooling system. In fact, they should be directed to other alternative institutions given their age, because it may not be of any advantage to keep them in school for this number of years. Here we're monitoring the number of learners with special needs. Now, our numbers have taken a drop. If you look at the 2021 number at 2,397, and that decreased to 1,132. But we are able to explain that because what we found happening in 2022 is that most of our learners with special needs wanted to take the full subject package of 7 subjects. And because of that, the number that took the 5 subject package, if you are a learner with special needs, you are now given a concession whereby you could register for 5 subjects instead of the full 7 subject package. So most of our learners with special needs decided to go for the full 7 subject package, and therefore this number took a drop, but these learners are still there. The learners with special needs still took the grade 12 exam, except that they now took the 7 subjects, and that explains the decline that you see. But this is another factor that we are monitoring very closely. Moving on to the next slide, which is correctional services. In 2021, you had 105 full-time learners who are in our correctional services facilities, and that number has increased to 104 in terms of the number that wrote. But if you look at the number that entered, it was 120 and it increased to 176. So here again, an increase. Another very important factor that we look at is social grant enrollments. Now, in the case of social grants, it's interesting to note that of the 752,000 learners that entered to write the matric exam, 596,000 of them received a social grant. But there are 2 categories of social grant recipients. We have those that are active. An active social grant recipient would have received the social grant up to his grade 12 year. And there are 138,000 of them that would have received a social grant up to the grade 12 year. But there are 457,000 of them that would have received a social grant in the years up to possibly grade 11. But because they would have turned 18 when they entered grade 12, they would have not received the social grant in their grade 12 year. And therefore they referred to as inactive recipients, and they are a large number. And later on, we will compare the performance of active social grant recipients to inactive social grant recipients, and you'll see that your active social grant recipients do better. On the next slide, we look at social grant enrollment by grant type, the different types of grants, and here we're comparing it for active and inactive. And most of our learners will be receiving child support grant. In 2022, you had 444,000 of them receiving a social grant or the child support grant and were inactive, and you had 110,000 who were active recipients receiving a child support grant. Now, in 2022, and possibly earlier, given the disadvantage that these learners were subjected to, we had to engage in extraordinary learner support. And I'm not going to go through all the detail, but on this particular slide, we talk about the WASA Matric program, which is driven directly by the Department of Basic Education, which includes video lessons, radio programs, print material, a massive advocacy campaign. And I think the point that I want to make is that, and that's on the next slide, is that in the case of 2022, there were distinct features of why this program was extraordinary. The number of residential camps was higher than previous. You had more learners that were being supported, more weekend support programs. The programs even started earlier. More languages were being offered. And if one goes on to the next slide, one will then realize that even our ex-Model C schools engaged in some of these extra classes. Some of these learners from ex-Model C schools attended these camps. So that made this program very much more effective, much more extensive, and that to a large degree explains why our class of 2022 were able to do better despite the obstacles that they face. I'm now moving on to the examination, and on slide 41, we talk about the scope and size of the 2022 NSC exam, just to give our honorable members an indication of the size of the examination that we're dealing with. We spoke about the number of 752,000 full-time, 168 part-time, 162 question papers, 10.4 million question papers had to be printed, 9.8 million scripts that had to be marked, which was administered at 6,904 centers. Now, let's move to the actual performance. And I think this is what you would want us to analyze a little further. And I'm sure much of this data, has been made available to you, so I'll try not to spend too much of time. I think this slide is one that we always like to look at, just to know where we come from and where we are. In 1970, you had only 43,000 learners attaining a matric. And in 2022, we had 580,000. This is far more than 10 times. So it's a significant increase in the number. And even if you compare from 1994, which was the beginning of our democratic dispensation, the numbers have also almost doubled from 287,000 to 580,000. So therefore, by all indicators and all measures, we are a system that is certainly improving and moving forward. And I think you all know that the pass rate in 2022 was 80.1, which is the highest in the last 3 years. In 2019, we had the highest of 81.3, but we are confident that in 2023, we will certainly be able to surpass the 80.13 percentage pass rate. On this next slide, slide 47, we look at the performance of the different provinces. I think here we want to commend the provinces, the larger provinces that have done well in terms of their improvement. If you look at KwaZulu-Natal, certainly stands out as a star province with an improvement of 6.2% from 76.8 in 2021 to 83% in 2022, an improvement of 6.2. Eastern Cape, an improvement of 4.3. Limpopo, 5.4. So it's our bigger provinces that are showing the most significant improvement. And this for me is another positive sign. Moving on to the next slide. Now, what we are doing as a system is to try and disaggregate our data in terms of fee-paying schools and no fee-paying schools. Because we think looking at the performance of the system as a whole is good, but one needs to know how our no fee-paying schools are performing. Now, if you look at the slide, there are 3 columns. It's fee-paying schools, it's independent schools, and no fee-paying schools. I think an important point to make is that a number of independent schools write the state exam. In fact, there are more independent learners that write the state exam than those learners that would write the exam of the IEB and Sakai. In fact, 25,000 learners last year from our independent schools wrote the state exam. While if you look at both Sakai as well as the IB, there are not more than 13,000 learners that wrote the examination of the IEB and Sakai. So we are servicing the independent sector, and the fact that the independent sector writes the state exam is also a vote of confidence. But my point with regard to this slide is on the bottom right-hand corner, that if you look at the no fee-paying schools, our no fee-paying schools are performing at 77.2%, which is reasonably high given the fact that these are more your rural schools, your under-resourced, underprivileged schools, compared to our fee-paying. If you just looked at fee-paying schools, they are performing at 85.9%, which is comparable to the 90.1% coming from our independent school. On the next slide, we look at performance in terms of gender. And again, going to the bottom right-hand corner, again, we see that our girls are doing better than our boys. 56.3% was the pass rate coming from our girls and 43% from the boy learner. In terms of numbers, 326,000 versus 253,000. Looking at passes by qualification type, which is on the next slide, here again, for me, the significant point is the point that I made earlier. If you take the number of bachelor passes together with the diploma passes, that's 278 plus another 193,000. So almost 500,000 of our learners are attaining a pass that will allow them admission to higher education, either a bachelor pass or an admission to bachelor studies or an admission to diploma. And in total, this is more than 60% of our learners. Moving on to the next slide, this just gives you the percentage pass in terms of bachelors from 2014. And you can see a slight drop and then an increase of almost 10% from 28% to 38% in 2022 with regard to our attainment in terms of bachelor. But I think what is most significant, Honorable Chairperson, is the numbers. In 2014, we had 150,000 learners attaining admission to bachelor studies. Now we've almost doubled the number in that period from 2014 to 2022. In a period of 8 years, it's almost doubled to 278,000 in terms of admission to bachelors. And this shows you the contributions of the different provinces. KwaZulu-Natal, Gauteng being the large provinces, contribute the biggest number, almost 130,000 of the learners that obtain admission to bachelors come from our 2 larger provinces, KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng. On the next slide, this is an interesting slide. As I indicated earlier, we're always looking at performance in terms of fee paying versus no fee paying. And remember, your no fee paying schools are your quintiles 1, 2, and 3. I know there's a lot of data on the slide, but the point that I want to make, if you look at schools, this is about school performance, schools as a whole. If you look at the number of schools that are performing above 80%, in other words, between 80 and 100%, and look at those schools in terms of quintile, we find that 2,492, if you can find that figure, is the number of schools from quintiles 1, 2, and 3 that are scoring overall above 80%. And in total, we have 6,904 schools that wrote the 2022 examination. But of the 6,904, 2,492 that scored above 80% come from quintiles 1, 2, and 3. So it simply shows that whatever the interventions are, whatever the programs are to support our no-fee paying school is really working. If that number of schools can now be performing above 80%. Now, here's another slide which also emphasizes that our policies relating to pro-poor are working. Now, here what we do is we also take the number of learners that have attained admission to bachelor's. And again, we look at them in terms of quintiles, 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Now, I want you to look at the table at the bottom and look at Q1 to 3, which is quintiles 1 to 3. We have 169,000 learners coming from quintiles 1, 2, and 3 that obtain admission to bachelor's, compared to the 93,000 coming from quintiles 4 and 5. And if you look at it even in terms of percentage, 64.4% come from quintiles 1, 2, and 3, and 35% come from quintiles 4 and 5. So we are moving the system in the right
Dr.
direction
Polia,
in terms of.
If we could move towards wrapping up in the next 5 to 6 minutes, so that there's enough time left for Umalusi, please.
Thank you, DG.
5 to 6 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, I'll do my best. Thank you, DG, for that reminder. Okay, we then move on to look at performance in terms of age, and I think the important point here is that our learners at 16, 17, and 18 are certainly doing better than our older learners, which is important. Now, this particular slide is important because as a department, we're moving towards not just looking at the percentage that passed, but we are saying that we need to look at a more inclusive set of criteria. And we're referring to this as the inclusive basket of criteria. And these are the criteria that we look at. And the criteria that are important that we've now added is your throughput, your distinction achieved. We're looking at participation in maths. We're also looking at performance in technical subjects. And we compare provinces in terms of these 9 criteria. And the point that I want to make here is that throughput is important because we find that some of our better performing provinces are not doing as well. For example, Free State has a low throughput and therefore it's shaded in red. But if you look at a province like Limpopo, it has a high throughput. Mpumalanga has a high throughput. Even if you look at maths participation, a province like Eastern Cape is doing well in terms of maths participation, Limpopo, Mpumalanga, while some of our better performing provinces like Western Cape has a low maths participation of 25.9. So I'm not going to go through all of these slides in detail. They are available. We now take each of the criteria in terms of performance in accounting, performance in maths, and compare this across provinces, maths participation, physical science performance, and the like, and throughput. Moving on to subject performance, I think what we are saying is that there's been a general improvement in subject performance, except these 3 subjects, business studies, history, and mathematics, where there's been a drop. And this is from the selected subjects where we are focusing. In terms of our technology subjects, the numbers may be low, but the performance is above 90%, which is a positive. And this provides you the detail in terms of the performance in the technology subject. With regard to district performance, also very important. I'm moving quite fast, so please, I hope that our secretariat is able to keep pace. We're looking at performance of the districts. This is the performance on slide 86. The performance of districts in 2021. In 2021, we had 12 districts that performed below 70%. But if you go on to the next slide, you'll find that we only had 4 districts in 2022 that performed below 70%. So that's a significant improvement. And our target is that in 2023, there would be no districts performing below 70%. These are your top 10 districts. The next slide, slide 88. And obviously, it's Free State that dominates the top 2 position, then Gauteng, Free State, KwaZulu-Natal. And then the bottom 10 districts. We then move on to special needs. Again, this is a good story to share. In 2021, we had a pass rate of 80.8% of our SNE learners that passed. That dropped slightly in 2022, but not significant. 79% of them passed in 2022. Progress learners, that's the percentage, 37.8%. But I think the part that I want to just focus on in terms of progress learners is this slide, slide 96, that 3,235 of our progress learners, in other words, learners that should have failed grade 11, or rather failed grade 11, and we progressed to grade 12, 3,235 of them obtained admission to bachelor studies. And they even obtained distinctions, and I'll show that to you now. This is a slide, slide 100, which shows you the number of progress learners that attain distinction. And if my site is correct, 6 of them obtained distinctions in mathematics, 5 of them obtained distinctions in physical science. Very quickly moving on to social grants, I think what I pointed out to earlier is that this is the performance overall of our learners receiving social grants, 71.2%. This shows you the performance difference between active and inactive. Active are performing at 87.2% and inactive at 75%. So it simply shows that our active recipients, those that receive a social grant up to grade 12, perform better than the inactive. Correctional services also doing well. In 2021, they performed at 89, and in 2022, they performed at, they did even better at 95.9. So they improved in terms of correctional services. Part-time candidates are doing reasonably well in terms of their performance. And this is the percentage pass, slide 111. It ranges from about 40 to just over 60%. On the next few slides, Chairperson, we provide a summary, because I should have mentioned and highlighted this at the beginning, that we also evaluate performance in terms of the social justice principles of access, redress, equity, quality, efficiency, and inclusivity. So we've taken the data coming from our 2022 examination, and we've looked at it in terms of the social justice principle. And we are able to show that in terms of each of these principles, the metric data confirms that we are on the rise. The last part of the presentation, Chair, relates to Umalusi and the issues that we are dependent on Umalusi to raise on an annual basis. And we look at the issues raised by Umalusi very, very closely. Based on their recommendations, we develop an improvement plan. And our improvement plan would be based on a collaboration with our provincial departments, looking at whatever needs to be reviewed, whatever needs to be strengthened. There's training and intensive monitoring so that we do not have a repeat. Now, in the slides that follow, we have a breakdown of each of the key recommendations made by Umalusi and what will be done by the DBE in conjunction with our provincial departments to make sure that we address these very important recommendations relating to all aspects of examination. So in conclusion, Chairperson, I think that the point that rings out loudly and clearly that this class was certainly a class of resilience, a class that has really done us proud. But I think what we have done is that we've now set a high benchmark, and the system now needs to pull out all the stops in terms of ensuring that 2023 produces a better performance. And I think finally, we need to appreciate parents, learners, educators, members of the portfolio committee, members of the select committee that continue to support the Department of Basic Education in its stride to providing quality education to all our learners in the country. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Dade Polia. Can we get Umalusi?
Yes, certainly. That's over to me, Chair. Thank you very much. Chair, good morning. I think it still is good morning, and we're going to certainly try to finish in good time. Allow me an opportunity to greet the acting chairperson of the select committee, Honorable Nsube. I also want to greet the minister, or rather the deputy minister, Dr. Mahaule, and in the absence, the Honorable Minister Machecha, as well as the chair of the select committee, Honorable M.E. Nchabaleng. Allow me, Chair, also to acknowledge the honorable members of the select committee, the Director General of Basic Education, Mr. Moeli, as well as the delegation from the Department of Basic Education. My name is Yunus Balam. I'm formerly Emeritus Professor of Civil Engineering at Wits University, and I'm the chairperson of the Umalusi Council. Allow me to introduce the delegation from Umalusi that is joining me here today. We have Dr. Mafu Rakometsi, who is the CEO of Umalusi, Mayor Zodwa Modibakwane, who is the Executive Manager for Quality Assurance and Monitoring. Mr. Emmanuel Subanda is the Executive Manager for Qualifications and Research. Dr. Eva Suji has joined us and is the Senior Manager for Qualifications, Curriculum and Certification. Mary Louise Madlane is the Senior Manager for Quality Assurance of Assessment. And lastly, Mr. Biki Lipota, who is the Senior Manager for Public Relations and Communications. Chair, we're grateful for this opportunity to brief the Select Committee on Education and Technology, Sports, Arts and Culture on the quality assurance process that Umalusi conducted in relation to the 2022 November National Senior Certificate Examinations and Assessments, which led to Umalusi approving the release of the results on the 16th of January 2023. The approval was given to the Department of Basic Education, the Department of Higher Education and Training, the Independent Examinations Board, and the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute. This presentation today will be led, or rather will be shared between the CEO, Dr. Rakometsi, and Mayor Madalane, the Senior Manager for Quality Assurance, as I said. In the presentation, we'll focus on the scope of the quality assurance of assessment process, the identified areas of improvement, and lastly, the recurring areas of non-compliance. And together with issues relating to standardization of examination results and the resulting processes. And then we'll talk about a way forward as by way of conclusion. Honorable Acting Chair, the members of the Select Committee, before I hand over to Dr. Rakometsi, allow me a few comments very briefly. And I want to particularly focus on two aspects of the presentation. Firstly, Umalusi relies on consistently applied and defensible standardization principles in adjusting marks. In turn, parents, learners, higher education leaders, employers all rely on these persistently applied education principles to ascertain the reliability and validity of the results that they receive. It is this awareness that gives such institutions and other stakeholders the confidence in the results that appear on a learner's certificate of educational achievement. Secondly, while irregularities were identified during the writing and marking of examinations, they were not of such a systemic nature as to compromise the overall credibility and integrity of the 22 NSC results. This is what led the Executive Committee of Umalusi Council to approve the release of the results. For this reason, Umalusi commends the Department of Basic Education for successfully administering what is essentially a very large and complex process and system, as you will have heard from Dr. Polya's presentation, and for conducting and managing the 2022 NSC examination so competently. Umalusi also congratulates all the assessment bodies for the improved overall results for the class of 2022. We would like to single out the Department of Basic Education, again, given the large numbers of learners for which they're responsible. It is a complex task to ensure that each one of over 720,000 candidates all over the country receives the correct question paper at the right time and in the correct venue. That scripts are collected and marked properly, that marks are verified and then transferred into the computer system, and that marks are then submitted for standardization and for implementation of the decisions on the system for the resulting process. All this done with proper attention to the integrity of the process. This is certainly most deserving of our commendation. Chair, I now hand over to Dr. Rakometsi to lead the presentation, and I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Professor Balim. Honorable Acting Chairperson, I'm going to play my video briefly so that you see who's speaking to you. I hope you are able to see me. I think that will suffice. Let me greet you, Honorable Acting Chairperson, Honorable Zube, and Honorable Deputy Minister, honorable members of the Select Committee, Professor Balim, the Chairperson of the Umalusi Council, our Director General, Mr. Matanzi Mamueli, and colleagues from both the Department of Basic Education and from Umalusi. We are grateful for the opportunity of briefing the Select Committee on the November 2022 National Senior Certificate Examinations. Whoever is displaying the presentation, please put it on slide mode. As I proceed, the presentation will follow the following outline. Next slide. Umalusi's mandate and regulatory framework for quality assurance of assessment, the quality assurance processes undertaken in 2022, the scope of the 2022 quality assurance of assessment, areas of improvement, directives for compliance and improvement, recurring areas of non-compliance, standardization resulting in problematic questions in the DBE Mathematics Paper 2, the recommendations and conclusion. Chairperson, firstly, about Umalusi's mandate and regulatory framework. We derive our mandate for quality assurance of assessment from two pieces of legislation, the National Qualification Framework and the General and Further Education and Training Quality Assurance Act as amended in 2008. Now, the NQF Act, Section 27H and 27I is relevant here in our discussions, and the GenFECWA Act, Section 17A, states the following. The Council must perform the external moderation of assessment of all assessment bodies and educational institutions. The Council may adjust raw marks during the standardization process. The Council, with the concurrence of the Director General and after consultation with the relevant assessment body or education institution, must approve the publication of the results if the Council is satisfied that the assessment body or education institution has satisfied the conditions that warrant such an approval. Now, Chairperson, we've got a framework for quality assurance of assessment. The framework ensures that the assessment leading to the award of certificates in schools adult education training centers, and technical and vocational education and training institutions that is of the required standard. This is to ensure that the certificates issued by Umalusi are credible. Now, we achieve this through the moderation of examination question papers, practical assessment tasks, common assessment tasks, in case of life orientation. We monitor and moderate school-based assessment. We audit the state of readiness to conduct examinations. We audit the appointment of markers. We monitor the conduct, administration, and management of assessment and examination processes. We standardize the marking guidelines. We monitor the verification of marking, management of concessions and examinations irregularities. We standardize the assessment outcomes, and we approve the release of the results. Now, regarding the National Senior Certificate, we've got 3 bodies that offer the National Senior Certificate in the country: the Department of Basic Education, the Independent Examinations Board, and the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute. Just to show the size of the enterprise that the DBE is busy with in the running of the examinations, we have given the figures there. The figures in 2022 in total was 920,900, as compared to the 13,536 of the IEB and 4,951 of the South African Comprehensive Assessment Institute. This only goes to show how big the system that the Department of Basic Education is running. Chairperson, with your permission, I'm going to hand over to Umalusi Madalani to proceed with the presentation, and she'll later on hand over to me to conclude the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, CEO, and good morning, Chairperson. Good morning, DG. Good morning, Deputy Minister, as well as honorable members of the Select Committee and all the other participants in the meeting. I'm going to be looking at the quality assurance processes that we have undertaken in 2022. And in the interest of time, I'm not going to be reading through all these presentations, but rather the slides. I will try and be as quick as possible. This slide gives us an overview of the processes that we have undertaken. For the moderation of question papers, we moderated and approved 162 question papers for the DBE, and we sampled some schools for school-based assessment. The numbers you'll see in the slide concerned. We did a state of readiness evaluation for the assessment body or the DBE to conduct the November 22 exams, and that was reported on the 14th of October in 2022. And we monitored a sample of 400 examination centers during the writing of the exams and 10 marking centers. And we participated in 139 question paper standard, rather 59 question paper standardization meetings, which comprised of 139 question papers. We verified 37 subjects across the 9 PEDs during the marking. And then the DBE presented to us 66 subjects for standardization. And those are the subjects which were considered for standardization that the CEO will speak to later. And all irregularities that were identified were managed in accordance with regulations pertaining to conduct, administration, and management of the National Senior Certificate. And Prof. Balim spoke a bit about this in his opening remarks. And after this, we compiled a detailed report on all these activities that we conducted, and we shared that with the DBE. And that's the part where Dr. Polia indicated their response to our request as far as the concerns that we had when we did our quality assurance processes. Now, each slide will then speak to the individual processes for moderation of question papers, areas of improvement. Number B gives the overall of that. The fact that not a single question paper was rejected in the first moderation. This symbolizes some form of stability in the subjects that were affected in the previous 2 years of the examination cycle. However, there were issues that we have identified that need the DBE's attention, and we named those directives for compliance and improvement. And in this case, we've listed those 3. And I guess from the slide from Dr. Polia, this were indicated and even how they are going to be handling that. And we will be monitoring this during the course of the year to see if they are improving. And in that monitoring, that's where we come up with recurrent non-compliance. So in monitoring the 2021 examinations and previously, as far as question papers were concerned, we have identified that low performance levels in the 2 criteria in the development of question papers, and that is text selection types and quality of question papers, and accuracy and reliability of marking guidelines. So in our directives, we have issued this with the concern that this is recurrent and the department must indicate how are they going to deal with it. But overall, like I've indicated, there was an improvement in the development of question papers. Now, the moderation of school-based assessment, the practical assessment tasks and oral assessment that we also conducted, this forms part of the results of the candidates. It gives 25% of the overall mark of the candidate. We did the moderation for SBA, and these are the subjects we selected. We could not do all the SBAs for rather all the subjects. We selected these key subjects. And the next slide shows in which provinces, which subjects were selected. I hope the members will then engage with this. And if there is any further questions on those, they can then address it with us. Also in the SBA, there were areas of improvement that we have noted, and the provinces that we have noted those improvements in are listed here. If you see in A, the Free State, Gauteng, KwaZulu-Natal, Mpumalanga, Northern Cape, and the Western Cape have shown some improvement in some of the subjects, and we've indicated that in the report as well. And another improvement to note was the presentation of marks by the assessor, rather by the PEDs, which we complained about in the previous years. Then we still had issues of concern, and we have listed the directives if you look at them there. Number 8 is a concern about the SASL home language in the Eastern Cape. And in this subject, the Eastern Cape PED must see to it that the subject policy prescripts are being adhered to. Secondly, we also have issues with levels of question difficulty in mathematics in Gauteng. The PED strengthened internal moderation for process and upskilling of teachers that is concerned in the geography teachers in Mpumalanga and the marine sciences teachers in the Western Cape. And the PED must capacitate teachers on assessment task presentations, technical layout, and assessment tasks. Then we move on again onto the recurrent non-compliance for the SBA here. They are listed there, but I want to stress the third one, non-adherence to CAPS and other policy requirements in the SASL home language. You'll see that when we speak to standardization, this is a concern that we have had for several years as far as the SAL home language is concerned. Now, the state of readiness, this is a process we conduct prior to the writing of the conduct of the examinations to ascertain that the assessment bodies are ready to present the examinations, and the findings, as I've indicated in the opening statements there, that are always announced prior to the exams. So the members should understand that we announce this prior to the exams, and we give the assessment bodies an opportunity to rectify those, correct those errors and report to us. So what I have here is prior to the exams and prior to the attention of the matters by the assessment bodies. It does not imply that when exams were written, this was the status. That was addressed and they were reported to us. Now, there was, Umalusi noted, progress was made in addressing most of the previously issued directives for compliance and improvement. Like I've indicated, they try very hard to make sure that prior to the conduct of the exams, the directives are addressed. Now, for the 2022 examinations, we still noted a few that needed to be addressed. A long-term solution to address the staff shortage at PED level. That is one issue that it's actually recurrent, this one. Almost every year when we conduct the state of readiness, we realize that there is staff shortages in the different directorates of the examinations. And there was also criteria for determination for storage and nodal points. It was also a concern. And we request that they deal with the following directives for compliance. Systems are in place to promote, support, and monitor the effective functionality of school-based rather school assessment irregularity committees, and the district assessment irregularity committees. A national strategy to advocate examination concessions, accommodations is in place so that then all the candidates get an opportunity, if need be, that they apply for such. And then concession requirements across unaccredited centers are also upheld. The current non-compliance issues that we noted in the previous audit, persisting staff shortage at provincial and district levels, I've alluded to that. Storage points which do not security norms and standards do not adhere to those, and failure to submit concession applications from unaccredited centers. Now, prior to the marking of the candidate scripts, we conduct an audit of appointed markers because the DBE and the PEDs appoint markers prior to the marking, and we go out there to see who they have appointed does qualify or not qualify to the criteria to be appointed as markers. And these are the findings. Areas of improvement based on the previous audit of appointed markers, we noted the following improvements: the selection and appointment of marking personnel with the required subject qualification and subject specialization, as well as the required teaching experience at grade 12. There was a great improvement in there because in the past we did identify those that were not appropriately appointed. The submission of documents for audit, because when we conduct our audit, we need a number of documents from the assessment bodies, and they did submit those to us, and they've indicated what we were looking for. So they made the audit possible so that we can report on our findings. The implementation of enhancements as adopted in 2021 were being carried forward by the PED. There is standard criteria that's put forward for all assessment bodies to appoint markers, but different provinces come up with enhancements which add on to the criteria that is given. And we have noted that those enhancements that they provided the different PEDs in 2021 were adhered to. Unfortunately, we still have directives for compliance here. The PED adhered to the stipulation ratio of 1:5. When senior markers and markers are appointed, they need to be in a ratio of 1:5. We have identified that certain PEDs did not meet the criteria of 1:5. And the PEDs obtain authorization from DG's Director General and or Head of Department for deviation from policy on appointment of markers. There were 1 or 2 provinces that did not attain that authorization, or if we have indicated that in our report, and we expect that to be dealt with within this period, so that when we audit the markers that are going to be appointed either for the June or November exams, that should be made. Then the non-current issue that we're really concerned about is this non-adherence to the ratio of 1:5, which we have currently mentioned in our report, and it was also identified again this year. Please note, it is not in all PEDs. The report does indicate which PED this comes from. Then when the exams are being conducted, we do a monitoring of the writing of the examinations, and this slide gives summary of our findings during that period. The improvements that we have observed: chief invigilators and invigilators were trained adequately in the execution of their invigilation roles and responsibilities, and this addresses a directive we issued in 2021. There was adherence by the exam centers to the prescribed requirements for storage and safekeeping of question papers. Fortunately, directive for compliance also was found that we need to ask the DBE to ensure that disciplinary measures are imposed on invigilators who fail to uphold their roles and responsibilities, because if this is not done, the current irregularities that happen in presence of invigilators will recur. So there is adults that are in those examination rooms really have to take responsibility of the issues that happen in their presence. Then there should be innovative ways to minimize examination irregularities. Furthermore, the issues that are recurrent as far as monitoring of the writing of exams are listed here. Non-adherence to general examination procedures as provided 4 in the regulation pertaining to the conduct. For any irregularity to happen, it means somebody did not adhere to what the regulation says, and it's what we have indicated in the previous slide about what we have noticed this year. But unfortunately, this is something that is recurring, because after every examination, we do have cases where irregular events have happened. Number B, increasing cases of behavioral offenses and acts of dishonesty that occur during writing. This summarized to possession of crypt notes, cell phones in the exam rooms, whatever, and possible assistance by invigilators. Those are the things that we have found in this exam, and they have happened in previous exams, and we request the department to really address those matters. Then for marking guideline standardization, I've indicated earlier that prior to the marking, we do attend the marking guideline meeting, standardization meetings, where decisions are made on what extra responses need to be put in the marking guidelines, seeing that after writing, the assessment bodies allow the markers to mark a few sample scripts, which will inform the standard of the marking guideline that we have. And this, we have noted the following improvement: the Northern Cape, which in 2021 did not fully comply, and Northwest complied with the requirement to provide chief markers and internal moderators with the required number of scripts. That is the sample that I said needs to be marked prior to the meeting, and the sample will inform how do we then handle the marking guideline that was developed during the development of a question paper. You may find that there are extra responses that we need to put into that marking guideline. Directives for compliance here, the DBE must ensure that all provincial internal moderators and chief markers meet the pre-marking requirement. Something recurrent, it's still that 20 script, because it is important that the 20 scripts mark so that we've got a good sample, 20 from all the 9 PEDs. That will inform decisions to the fact that we need to add extra responses to marking guidelines or not. Monitoring of marking. When marking is taking place, we do monitor that marking as well. And areas of improvement are noted here. All marking centers were ready. Remember, when we did the state of readiness, we also checked on the marking centers that the assessment bodies have identified. And there is criteria that we look at, and we noted that there were improvements based on the directives we issued in 2021. Lists of all marking personnel were available and could be verified, and this helped that we are able to conduct the audit of appointed markers. And areas of improvement going further there, all centers could produce the occupational health and safety certificates, and those one was outdated, but we spoke to that in the presentation, in the reports. And timers arrival of scripts and the marking guidelines, as well as, sorry for that, I forgot to switch off my phone. And a vast improvement in the consistency and standard of security measures that was addressed. Now, the recurrent non-compliance here that we had in the examinations for the monitoring of the marking, while there is evidence of improvement on the timer's supply of marking guidelines to the marking centers, there are isolated incidents of late delivery of marking guidelines for the subject whose marking guidelines discussions are held towards the start of the marking or coincides with the start of the marking guidelines. So this also needs to be addressed, and the department should also take cognizance of the fact that this is recurrent. So to improve on the marking, this must be addressed as a matter of urgency. Verification of marking. When scripts are marked, Umalusi then send out moderators, external moderators, to also verify on the marking. They select the number of scripts and mark those scripts and come up with a report on how the marking fared. For areas of improvement, the area that showed improvement in the marking process was noted as follows. There was marked improvement in internal moderation across various levels of moderation, as it was highlighted in 2020 as an area of non-compliance. And only a few sporadic incidents of shadow marking were reported. Directives for compliance, the DBE must ensure that The internal moderation of the marking of South African Sign Language home language is intensified. I've indicated earlier we've got a serious concern with the subject South African Sign Language. So the marking must also be intensified. The PED must comply with the 1:5 ratio for appointment of senior markers and markers, deputy chief markers to senior markers respectively. And recurrent non-compliance matters as far as verification of marking is concerned is again the 1:5 ratio and the inconsistent marking and internal moderation in SASL home language paper 2. Then I'll hand over to the CEO to speak to the standardization of results. Thank you, Chairperson.
Thank you very much. I think we should just note that at least by 20 minutes to, I think, 11:40, I think we should be done. I just wanted to pass that message so that we work on the time frames that we have set for ourselves. Thank you very much. So you can come in.
Thank you very much, Honorable Chairperson. We'll definitely be done by that time. Standardization, maybe the question that arises is, what is standardization? On this next slide, we say standardization is a process, if you could just move the slides, please, is a process used to eliminate the effects of factors other than the learner's knowledge, abilities, and aptitude on their performance. We standardize to ensure that learners are not advantaged or disadvantaged by factors other than their knowledge of the subject's abilities and aptitude, and also to achieve comparability and consistency of the results from one year to the next, so that a distinction of 2022 should be comparable with the distinction of 2017 or 2018 for that matter. The standardization process has got a number of principles, but we single out these 4 that are indicated on the screen. No adjustment should exceed 10% of the historical average in either direction, either upwards or downwards. If the distribution of the raw marks is below or above the historical average, the marks may be adjusted either way, subject to the limitations set in the first bar. In the case of an individual candidate, the adjustment effective should not exceed half of the raw marks obtained by the candidate. In other words, if we adjust and we obtained 10 marks, the adjustment would not exceed half of that 10 marks in either direction, upwards or downwards. After considering quantitative and qualitative reports, Umalusi formulates positions on each subject. Now, what follows in the next slide are the different assessment bodies whose qualifications we have standardized. I'll not go through the list. You can see the list of the Department of Basic Education, which we are discussing now. In 2022, we had to standardize 66 subjects, 47 of which were adjusted and kept at raw marks, 16 of which were adjusted and adjusted mainly upwards, 3 of which were standardized and adjusted mainly downwards. So it also shows the percentages and the history over the years. One of the things that we dealt with that was difficult last year was an error that occurred in mathematics paper 2. So Umalusi was inundated, next slide please, by queries from the different stakeholders regarding the problematic question 5.1 in paper 2. We issued a media statement on several matters, including the problematic question 5.1. We proposed, that during the marking guideline discussions, that the 7 marks that were problematic should be excluded. We had to issue a number of media statements thereafter until we realized that we have to appoint a panel to investigate this matter. On the next slide, in the interest of time, ultimately, when it went to the marking, the next slide, please, slide 53. When we went to marking to compensate for the 7 marks that had been deducted, the following decisions were taken, that marks in question 5, which were out of 30, should in fact be marked out of 23. I'm now on the next slide. Convert the mark out of 23 marks to a mark of 30 marks. This means that a candidate who obtained 23 marks will be awarded 30 marks. This resulted in the reduction of the total marks for question 5 from 30 to 23. For this reason, the marks achieved by each candidate were converted to a mark out of 30 marks as indicated in the table that follows. So that a candidate who obtained one out of, let me see the conversion quickly. 1 out of 23 will get 1 out of 30. The one who gets 2 out of 23 would get 3 out of 30. The one who got 3 out of 23 would get 4. 4 will get 5. 5 will get 7. I'm just skipping others. 9 will get 12. 12 will get 16 out of 30. The one who got 19 out of 23 will get 25 out of 30, up to the point where we get 23 out of 23. That candidate would then get 30. In that way, we compensated fully for the marks that were removed from the question. Umalusi's position has been given there, and we illustrate the point on other problematic questions, that it is not only in mathematics where we had problematic questions. Yes, in mathematics 5.1, I've just illustrated how we dealt with the 7 marks. And then in mathematical literacy, question 4.26, 6 marks were wrong, where the question erroneously refers candidates to the year 2019 instead of the year 2020 in mathematical literacy. In Sepedi, question 2.5, 2 marks, it refers to an incorrect weight, Hakancho, instead of Hakanchano. IEB also had some errors. Question 3.4.1, 2 marks, refers candidates to find a historical concept in paragraph 2 instead of paragraph 1. English communication, those questions illustrated the 4 marks, required candidates to identify underlined weights where no weight was underlined. I've already spoken to the 3-member panel, and I would call for the members of the committee to look at the recommendations of the panel at their leisure time. And we note the following under slide number 16, that there is a continued poor performance in the NSC South African Sign Language home language, and we say this is worrisome, and we call for the department to have serious interventions when it comes to this subject. Emerging trends relating to assistance by invigilators and teachers also is worrisome, where learners who are writing examinations are assisted by the invigilators, and teachers who are allowed into the examination room to assist learners. That is something that is unacceptable, that has to be corrected. Also, we're asking the Department of Basic Education to build capacity in internal moderators to enhance the quality of internal moderation, so that we don't have the recurrence of problematic questions, questions with errors in the examinations. That the DB must monitor compliance to policy prescripts as provided for effective implementation of internal assessment. And the DB must also invest in beefing up security at storage points. The norms and standards for security of question papers should be observed, with close monitoring of its implementation across all levels of the system. And that invigilators found conflicted by being involved in advantaging learners unlawfully must be charged for serious misconduct. The point made by Mema Dalani about the shortage of staff also has to be emphasized, because it is something that we say every year. the Executive Committee of Council issued a statement, which is flighted on our screens, which approved the release of the DBE National Senior Certificate Examination results. I'm not going to read the statement. I think it will suffice for members to read the statement themselves. What I'll just highlight are 2 points on the next slide where we conclude that the Department of Basic Education will have to submit a report on the action taken against officials implicated in the irregularities. We're still awaiting that report, and then address the directives for compliance and improvement highlighted in the Quality Assurance of Assessment report, and submit an improvement plan by the 15th of March 2023. I saw a number of reports from different assessment bodies starting to come in last week, around the 15th. I still have to check whether the colleagues have received that one of the Department of Basic Education. Finally, what I want to highlight is what the Executive Committee of Council said to the department, which Professor Balim repeated in this meeting, that the Executive Committee of Council commends the DBE for conducting a successful examination on such a large scale. The DBE is running a big system, and for them to manage such a big system without big problems, that is truly appreciated. I want to thank you, Chairperson, and those are our contact details. I want to thank all the members of the Select Committee, the Deputy Minister, the Minister, the DG for your support. Thank you very much.
No, thank you very much to the department led by the Deputy Minister and the Umalusi. I think we have received quite a comprehensive and a detailed report or presentations. So I think it is at this moment we will open the session for members of the Select Committee to engage the report. We will just note hands, members, so that we can engage the presentation that we've received now. Can I note hands, members? I think Ntate Baha will be the first, Mme Christians will be the second, and then the third will be Mendo Ngedi. In that order, please. Ntate Baha, you will the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chairperson, and good morning to the DM and the department. Chair, I have a few questions that I would like to raise. One, serious challenges are noted in slide 60, emerging trends relating to assistance by invigilators and teachers, which is examination officials, is worrisome. Can I please be given more info on actions taken to date linked to the mentioned serious challenges observed on slide 60? Secondly, Chairperson, I've noted the last speaker or presenter in terms of the 15th of March submission from various entities and the department. I wanted to check whether the improvement plan noted to be submitted by the department has been submitted or not. But I get a sense that there were reports received, but they were not yet interrogated or noted as to where they are coming from. The third aspect, Chairperson, is the results of the class of 2022 is a strong signal of recovery and renewal. That is on slide 16. To what extent did the minimum of 30% for some subjects to be awarded a pass contribute towards the logic behind this statement? Another question, Chairperson, is on slide 31, which notes that the progress, which is the progress of progressed learners, noting both a 30% pass for some subjects and the policy that allows for the progression of learners, how is the department protecting the perception of value of the NSC as a qualification leading to employment and or success in higher education? On slide 43 to 46, Chair, which talks about WOZA metrics outputs and distinct features of learner support, how will the key successes be duplicated in 2023? Can we be shared with the plan for proposed oversight as the NCOP? The last one, Chairperson, on slide 133, second class metric program, does not have the capacity to cater for all learners. Can you share with us the department's plan to enhance the reach of the SEMPs across provinces? Thank you, Chairperson. That was the last question.
Thank you very much, Member Bacha. Member Christians.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. I also have quite a few questions. I would like to ask the department about the gender gap that we've noted on the enrollment and the academic performance. Now, my question is, how is the gender gap in enrollment and academic performance influencing the support and resource allocation by the DBE to educational institutions? And what is being done to support these male learners who are performing at an average of about 10% lower than females across all provinces? I think that is something that we need to work on and something that we need a few answers on. Then there is a marked difference in the bachelor and diploma pass rates between fee-paying schools and no fee-paying schools. That was noted on page 65. And it seems that fee-paying and independent schools are achieving a higher percentage of bachelor passes than no fee-paying schools across the provinces. My question is, what are the planned support and resources for 2023 to maintain and increase the number of bachelor passes in no fee-paying schools? And then also on slide 99, it was noted that the 2022 mathematics achievement is at 55% and mathematical literacy is at 85.7%. It shows a similar kind of discrepancy in the part-time mathematics and maths literacy pass rates. Now, what plans are in place for 2023 to improve the performance in both mathematics and mathematical literacy? And does the department give the chance to people or learners who have failed mathematics to, in the second chance matric, perhaps to write maths literacy? That is just a question for clarity, perhaps. And then on page 100 or slide 100 and 102, I just have a question with regard to the technical subjects there. Something that has recently also been, some research has been done on that, and it has been in the media somewhat, where there has been a question as to the TVET colleges, the subjects TVET colleges offer, the technical subjects, and the subjects offered by schools, the NCV, the FET curriculum. Now, is there a duplication in these subjects, and how feasible is it then to have TVET colleges teaching similar subjects to the NCV curriculum, and is that in any way an issue for the department? With regard to special needs learners, what are the department's plans to continue the support for special needs schools, training teachers, appointing qualified support staff at these schools? I know that especially in the Northern Cape, there's a continued struggle because of the vast distances, that there are not enough schools, and the schools that we do have in the Northern Cape only offer a limited capacity, which means that there is not enough place for the special needs learners in the Northern Cape province. So specifically on that, what is being done where there are not enough special needs schools in provinces as vast as the Northern Cape? The question on the second chance matric program has been asked by my colleague. Then for Umalusi. Now, can Umalusi please provide us with information on the key irregularities identified in the National Senior Certificate examinations? If possible, per province and per district where they occurred. I think this would be important for us so that if necessary, we can go and do oversight there as a select committee. Then what is the status of DBE's formal acknowledgement on those key findings? And what has been the response to the detailed draft report that Umalusi has requested from DBE? When does DBE envision to send that report to Umalusi? And then what support and training has been provided to personnel involved in developing question papers to address the recurrent non-compliance related to text selection types, the quality of questions, as well as accuracy and reliability of marking guidelines. This was on page 14. And then based on the recurrent non-compliance as identified on slide 24, what recommendations can Umalusi provide to improve provincial oversight in terms of staff shortages at provincial and district levels? Also with regard to storage points that do not adhere to security norms and standards, as we've heard during the presentation, as well as the failure to submit concession applications for unaccredited centers. Then lastly, a chairperson, can the department as well as Umalusi comment on or provide information on the action taken against officials implicated in the irregularities as noted on page 63, as well as details concerning the improvement plan that DBE is also required to submit or was required to submit by the 15th of March already to address the directives of compliance and improvement highlighted in the quality assurance assessment report. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Yeah, thank you very much, Kristen. Mendo Ngeni.
Thank you very much, Chair. Morning, Chair. Morning, DM and the crew. Morning, members. My question is on slide 147, Chair. The PD strengthen internal moderation process and upskill teachers on moderation practice to improve the implementation of the SBA process intervention strategy. DBE to conduct an audit of the SBA system across all PEDs. Department of Education will ensure that the PEDs monitor and support district to ensure the authenticity of the learner evidence, verifying marks awarded by teachers, ensure that SBA PTA oral assessment requirements have been complied with. Can please elaborate on the audit of the SBCA system across all PEDs to the conduct and how such will be reported on? And again, please elaborate on how the DBE will ensure that the PED monitor and support district. Can they please share details of provincial engagement linked to this to assist the committee during oversight? The second slide is still on 149. A major non-negotiable criteria for evaluation of storage nodal points are uttered by the all PEDs intervention strategy. Further improvement in the security of storage points is implemented across the PEDs in 2023, which will continually monitor the improvement. Can they please elaborate on how further improvement in the security storage points are being monitored across all PEDs and how such will be reported on? And please share details of provincial engagement linked to the assist the committee during oversight. The last one, Chair, on slide 150, all provincial internal moderators and chief markers meet the MSM pre-marking requirements, intervention strategy, examination instruction to be issued by the Department of Education in March 2023 to PEDs, emphasizing the need for compliance to marking standardization meeting requirements. Can they please update us on the status of the above in terms of the date issued? Thank you, Chair, and response received from provinces. Thank you, Chairperson.
No, thank you very much, Member Ndwengeni, and let me just thank all the members who have had a bite on the presentation. Just lastly, I'm not quite sure about the slide, but I know it is the initial part of the slides where it mentioned that at least from 2011, between 2011 and 2022, the Department of Education has lost about 401,459 learners. I just want to check because I know that the functioning or the duty of education is not about, or is not a sole role of department, it's about society in general. But I just want to check with the Department of Education about what are the methods or what are the interventions in place to make sure that we keep as many learners in the system so that they don't go out and then be out of the system. I just wanted to check that with the Department of Education. I think we can give to the Department of Education, and then Umalusi will follow up after the Department of Education so that they can respond to the questions posed by members. Deputy Minister. Department of Education, it's your turn to respond to the questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Acting
Chair,
Chair.
I'm sorry. I just need to indicate that Deputy Minister had to leave and didn't want to disturb the meeting, Chair, for some matter that required urgently, Chair. If you allow, Dr. Pulia could start to respond to the questions, and I'll come in immediately after him. Is that fine, Chair?
No, we're very much comfortable, but maybe if next time Deputy Minister could just indicate to the chair that she'll be excused, we'll really appreciate it. But I think Dr. Pulia can proceed in answering the questions.
Yes, we accept that, Chair. It's an oversight. She indicated that to me to convey it to the chair. So I'm sorry about that. We'll make sure that it happens next time. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much, DG.
Thank you.
Thank you, Acting Chair, and thank you, DG. And let me also indicate my appreciation to the Select Committee for the very deep and insightful questions regarding the presentation. I think it certainly, allows us to dig deep and to reflect more seriously on what we do. And I think throughout our presentation, the focus has been on improvement. And I think looking at the series of questions that have been provided, it certainly is going to be directing us in that path. The first question from Honorable Baka with regard to assistance by invigilators and teachers, I think this is certainly that we condemn at the highest level, and our invigilators and teachers are there to ensure a credible exam. Now, we have identified a few teachers that have been implicated, but I must indicate that particularly in the Mpumalanga irregularity, the investigation is ongoing. The one teacher that shared answers erroneously on a teacher group chat, I mean, the teacher has been identified. He was suspended immediately, and he's currently going through the normal disciplinary process in terms of the Employment of Educators Act. I must also indicate that the cell phone of this teacher has also been confiscated, and we have appointed a company that is currently busy with the forensic analysis of the cell phone of this teacher together with learners. So in terms of invigilators, I mean, where invigilators are found to have not complied with the code or supported learners in any way, we certainly take the hardest kind of action. And I think the Employment of Educators Act is clear that any teacher that is found to be guilty of an examination irregularity, this is a dismissible offense. So our provinces have procedures in place for educators that have been identified to be non-compliant. They will certainly go through the necessary disciplinary procedures, and appropriate action will be taken. In terms of the improvement plan, we did submit the improvement plan to Umalusi, and I'm sure that will also be acknowledged. And we do this on an annual basis to take every recommendation and look at it and make sure that we have firstly improved from what was raised in the last improvement plan, and that we are also moving the system forward. So that has been done. The minimum of 30%, Honorable Baka, and how this has contributed to this improvement. As I explained, the 30% is obtained by learners as 1 or 2 in terms of the minimum threshold. So it will be obtained in 1 or 2 subjects. No learner can obtain a senior certificate if he obtains 30% in all 6 subjects or all 7 subjects. And the point that I tried to clarify is that in terms of admission to bachelor's, you must obtain 450s. In terms of admission to diploma study, you must obtain 440. So in terms of the contribution of the 30%, it is certainly the minor contribution. Most of our learners, and we could do an analysis in terms of, you know, the number of learners that obtain 30%, but the bulk of the passes would come from learners obtaining 40%, 50% and above, and the 30% will certainly be in the minority. Progression, I think progression has been implemented as a mechanism to deal with the throughput, because it does not make sense to continuously keep learners in grade 10, in grade 11, and learners continuously fail. And I think the progression policy implemented by the minister was a bold step. And it has shown that with progression, we are able to get learners through. So if you look at the 50,000 learners who were progressed, almost 40% of them have now attained the NSC, which simply means that with the required support, these learners can satisfy the requirements of the NSC. And I think that the policy on progression is in no way undermining the integrity and the standards required of the NSC, because whether you're a progress learner or whether you are a learner that has not been progressed, you must still satisfy the same requirements at the end of grade 12. There's no condonation dispensation. Previously, we had the MEO, and that has now been outlawed, the multiple examination opportunity. So progress learners must still satisfy the requirements as stipulated by the minister and quality assured by Umalusi. The plan for 2023 in terms of improvement of performance, in fact, our DG requested such a plan to be presented at the senior management meeting, which took place on Monday. We had an extensive meeting which started at 9 and ended at about 3 o'clock. That plan will also be presented at the HEDCOM meeting of the 3rd and the 4th of April. So the improvement plan relating to 2023, and what we normally do, Honorable Acting Chair, is to look at what worked and what was able to produce the desired output. And those activities are certainly the ones that we will enhance and devote more resources. In fact, our DG has just requested us to look at what are the gaps that this class of 2023 would have sustained in the last 3 years of COVID. And that's what we're busy with, looking at those gaps and making sure that those gaps are attended to. So the 2023 improvement plan in terms of learner performance is top priority. We present a complete, what is known as an evidence-based report to Umalusi, and that evidence-based report will assist Umalusi in terms of understanding what was done to address the learning losses, the time disruption that this class would have suffered, and how appropriately can Umalusi then approach its quality assurance approaches. Enhancing the reach of Second Chance Matric program, our Minister and DG are continuously advocating the Second Chance Matric program. In fact, our Minister has already conducted a number of outreach meetings with members of the community, and particularly adults that need to take the Second Chance Matric program. And if I can say that last year, we've now extended the NSC in terms of learners that would have not done well, or learners that would have failed from 2008 can now come back and repeat. So provided you have a school-based assessment component, you can come back and repeat. So we are constantly reviewing our policies. We're constantly trying to look at greater access to our adult learners in terms of the Second Chance Matric program. Our Second Chance Matric program is also currently looking more at a skills focus, because if learners could not cope with the academic, we need to now look at whether we could bring in some skill subject. And I also need to say that in terms of adult learners, the responsibility lies greater with the Department of Higher Education and Training. And we already are in discussions with the Department of Higher Education and Training in terms of how can we collectively support these adult learners in terms of extending. And our Second Chance Matric program not only deals with face-to-face, there are about over 150 centers where there's face-to-face engagement, but there's online support, there's video material, there's TV programs. So whatever programs we make available to our full-time learners, this material is also made available. In fact, we have USB sticks where all the material is copied and made available to our Second Chance learners so that they have access to this material if they do not have access to the online availability of these documents. Honorable Christians, with regard to the gender gap, I think that is a significant point that you're raising. And like I said, our program up to now has been focusing on the girl learner, and therefore we are now looking at this more closely in terms of supporting the boy learner. And there are initiatives in place, although they are in the early stages of formulation. And obviously the issue of bullying is one that is impacting on our boy learners. And we are initiating further research in terms of the boy learner so that we can understand more clearly what are the factors impeding the progress in terms of the boy learner. And obviously resources will be redirected accordingly. In terms of bachelor passes, I think, Honorable Christians, I did present a slide, which I'm not sure whether I mentioned, but it's a slide that our president always is attracted to, where we show that in terms of bachelor passes, that our quintiles 1, 2, and 3, our no-fee schools, are producing more bachelor passes than our quintiles 4 and 5. Now, that is understandable from one perspective, simply because you have more schools in quintiles 1, 2, and 3. But the fact that even though there are more schools and more learners in quintiles 1, 2, and 3, we are now showing that from this majority, we're now having more learners if my memory serves me right, I think it was about 160,000 learners compared to about 90,000 learners coming from quintiles 4 and 5. So over 160,000 of these learners come from quintiles 1, 2, and 3. So in terms of our disadvantage and our more rural schools, I think there is certainly clear indication that there is progress in that direction, but we are not saying that we've arrived. There's certainly much more work to be done in terms of our no-fee paying schools. And our support program to them will certainly be improved and enhanced wherever necessary. Improvement in maths, and I don't think we are satisfied with maths. I mean, maths, science, technology has been the focus of our department for the last few years. And we continuously review our program. And we've come to realize that solving the maths problem does not lie in grade 12. It has to start as early as ECD and our foundation phase. And that's basically what we're doing. But with all those initiatives in terms of foundation phase, we're not going to see the results, in this exam or in the next 2 or 3 years. It's going to take us some time if we're starting at the bottom in terms of improving maths. And I think Professor Ballum talks about maths anxiety. And these are issues that are critical in terms of having to deal with maths performance. And those are the issues that we are dealing with, which are more long-term. But obviously, in terms of grade 12, annually, just to give one example, we have a diagnostic report which looks at the performance of learners in the maths examination in 2022. And this diagnostic report looks at question by question analysis. Where have learners performed poorly? Why? And what is it that can be done? Now, that diagnostic report is out already. It would be used by our subject advisors to support our learners. So we have a comprehensive maths program, but obviously it's taking longer to see the fruit of this program. And we continuously review our program moving forward. And I think that is not just maths, but we look at maths in totality with also having to include technical maths and maths literacy, because I think all our learners need to have a knowledge of mathematics. In terms of the duplication, I think that's another important point, Honorable Christians, that you're touching on, which we are dealing with. And we are setting up meetings and task teams to look at the duplication and how that could be. And I'm sure DG will want to add more regarding the TVET colleges, the programs they offer, and how do we make sure that that is minimized. Our LSEN learners, I think I just need to mention that Minister has appointed a committee to review White Paper 6, and the Ministerial Committee has met. And this Ministerial Committee has established, I think, at least 5 streams to cover the various aspects of learners with special needs, which covers the aspects that you've alluded to, Honorable Christian. So learners with special needs, inclusive education is certainly priority. And I think on an annual basis, we are improving our support and making sure that schools are available to support learners with special needs. The issue of irregularities, I think we've touched on that in terms of educators and officials. Honorable Dongani, with regard to SBA. Now, what we've realized, Honorable Dongani, is that year after year, we conduct moderation of SBA. And you'll find that in our moderation process, you see slight improvement, but you tend to pick up the same kind of issues that emerge from one year to the other. And therefore, what we've decided for this year is that we are going to conduct an audit of SBA systems, both in the FET and GT band. In other words, we're going to go and engage with the province and understand from the level of policy, to guidelines, to training, to support, to monitoring, to moderation. What exactly the province is doing? Unless we have systems in place, we're never going to see progress in terms of some of these endemic challenges that we're dealing with. So we will at some point, if the committee allows us to, once we've completed the audit in a few provinces, to present what the findings are so that we could deal with school-based assessment. Because I think in principle, there is the undertaking that school-based assessment has to become the more prominent component in assessment. We have to minimize the focus on external examination and strengthen the capacity of our teachers so that they could become key role players in determining whether learners are making the desired progress and whether learners should be progressed from one grade to the other. So school-based assessment is certainly an area that we will be prioritizing over the next few years. Security of storage point. Now, I think you've also picked up on another important point. We have these large number of storage points, but given the fact that question papers are stored at these points, we've come up with clear criteria that every storage point must comply with. And on an annual basis, we do an audit of these storage points. Now, we can provide you with a breakdown of storage points that comply fully, storage points that comply partially, and storage points that do not comply. Obviously, storage points that do not comply, we don't allow them to store question papers. But our focus will be on storage points that partially comply and getting them to be fully compliant. We've raised this at HEDCOM. HEDCOM has agreed that they would make sure that they make available funding so that our storage points have the desired security measures put in place in terms of cameras, in terms of physical security, surveillance, and the like. So that is certainly an area we leave no stone unturned in making sure that we meet the requirements that we have set and agreed upon. With regard to compliance to marking standardization, we do have review meetings, which will be starting shortly. And at these review meetings, the compliance to marking standardization, together with other issues where there are gaps which have been raised by Umalusi, which we've put into our improvement plan, will be shared with our provincial departments. And we are finalizing the circular that will go out, listing to each province what are the areas that they need to deal with, together with our improvement plan. In fact, we have a lekotla of all our national examination managers scheduled for the 17th, 18th, and 19th of April, where all of this will be discussed, and we would then look at the best mechanisms that can be put in place moving forward. With regard to the loss of over 400,000 learners that has been raised by our acting chair, I think we did raise this previously, and I'm sure DG would want to add that this certainly is not a fact. I think what we've seen in terms of our matric data is that we now have more learners in grade 12 rather than what we had pre-COVID. And what I did point out in terms of the data, that our throughput is really increasing. So this loss of over 400,000 learners, I think our DG will be able to address that in more detail. So maybe I can stop there, DG, and I'm sure you want to fill in the gaps where I did not do justice. Thank you, DG.
No, thank you very much, Dr. Pulia. The 34 years of experience in exams that come in handy. You've covered, I think, 99% of comments and questions raised by honorable members. Chair, let me apologize again about the departure of the Deputy Minister without formal notification to you. I'll bring this to the attention of the Deputy Minister. Just maybe a few points. In terms of what was required, Honorable Baha, the program for Hosa Matric will make that available to the office of the chair of the Select Committee, including what was requested by Honorable Christian in terms of the programs that we have to improve performance. We'll also make that available to the office of the chair. Indeed, Honorable Christian, there is some duplication in the offerings of the NCV and the new areas of specialization that we have introduced in 2018. We are working with the Department of Higher Education and Training to deal with that, because in terms of levels in the NQF, all of these are offered at
It appears like we lost the DG. I do not know if it's me.
No, I think so. You're correct, Honorable Acting Chair, but I'm sure we just need to give him a few seconds. Possibly
Okay.
will come back.
Okay, let's just get him back to a meeting. Let's
level
just
4.
get.
So there are duplications, and we are working together to deal with those, together with the Department of Higher Education and Training. Dr. Polia is right. Chair, can you hear me now?
We were losing you, DG,
Chair,
but
can you hear me?
now we can hear you, DG.
Hello?
DG?
Hi, good morning.
Oh, good afternoon, Chairperson.
Oh, it's good afternoon already. I've just landed. Sorry, I've just joined the meeting now. I'll just hook in and listen.
Okay, no, thank you very much, Chairperson.
Yeah.
The DG was
Thanks.
on the floor. I don't know the department. Can you check with the DG, because we are losing him? We have lost him.
I'll do that. I'll do that, Honorable Chair. I'm doing that now. Thank you.
But I think in the meantime, we can give to the Umalusi to respond if there's anything.
Chair, thank you for that. The questions were really of such technical detail that I think I'm going to leave it to Dr. Rakometse to respond. I wanted to just make two comments, and the one is, while it is expected, and I'm glad that we've arrived at a moment where this is a normal expectation, we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that a feature of last year's examinations is that there were no leaks. Nothing that was of such a serious concern as to cause us panic. There was some irregularities and improper behavior, but the department has got to a point where we can comfortably say that we are running a system that is very well looked after. My second comment is in relation to the issue of performance in mathematics, and I wanted to agree with Dr. Polia's comment that we're coming to a sense, and I'm not a maths educator, I'm a civil engineer, I work in computational mathematics, and I've been teaching it for a long time, but I'm not a maths educator. But I think we're getting to a sense where the kernel of the problem lies with the formative stages of mathematics thinking and mathematics reasoning in young children. And that really is at the basic and the primary school level. The second area of concern, which I guess finer minds than mine in this area must think about, is not only what we teach in mathematics, it seems to be more importantly how we teach mathematics as a reasoning and logical thinking competence, rather than as a way in which you solve problems with a calculator. Those are my high-level comments. It's of course a subject for much further discussion, and as I said, for finer minds than mine on this subject. But with that, I'd like to hand over to Dr. Rakometse to deal with really the 3 or 4 fairly detailed, direct questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor Bali. Just to confirm that Umalusi has received the improvement plan from the Department of Basic Education. And Dr. Polia has also touched on the approach of the DBE on some of the items that have been raised. Umalusi still has to study the report and engage with the report because we only received the reports from the different assessment bodies during the course of last week. And I want to confirm once more that we have received the report of the Department of Basic Education. Chairperson, on the 30% debate, we need to just appreciate that a pass at that level is as old as the trick itself, because the qualification serves many purposes. People who want to go into the world of work, people who want to go to university, and people who just want to be good citizens without furthering their studies and without working. It serves those purposes. So, and also that our children are gifted differently, and not all of them are destined for universities. You know, the pass percentage at 40% used to be a pass percentage in the old metric for a higher grade pass. Standard grade used to be 33 1/3 in the old metric. And that standard grade pass of 33 1/3 could still be converted to lower grade to effect a pass. And that lower grade was 25%. It was worse than the 30% that we speak about. And also the students who pass at the minimum of 3 subjects at 40%, 3 subjects at 30% are so few. They are around 100 in number from one year to the other, out of an examination that is written by about 800 candidates. So the people who get the bare minimum are very few. Chairperson, I want to also talk to the technical subject. The DG made an input on that. However, he was cut at some point. And there could be some overlaps between what I'm going to say and what he intended to say. I'm going to say my say nonetheless. First of all, the qualification NCV, National Certificate Vocational, offered at the Tibet colleges, and the NSC, our metric, offered at the schools. They are at the same level of the NQF, National Qualifications Framework. Because the NCV was a new qualification and it had not gained traction in the system. What Umalusi did is that we wrote to the Department of Public Service and Administration, alerting them that the NCV is at the same level as the NSC. And when they advertise posts for the public servants, they can actually take it that whoever has an NCV certificate has met the same requirements as whoever has the NSC in terms of the NQF levels. I have now a staff member who's an admin clerk at Umalusi who's got the NCV. She did not go the NSC route. I spoke to her and she told me clearly, CO, after grade 9, I did NCV and she got a post at Umalusi. We have to understand that the difference between NSC as offered at schools and the NSC is that the NCV is more practical because it is leading more towards a vocation. So the NCV is more vocational. And we also have a study which will be on our website where we compared the curriculum of the two qualifications in the gateway subjects of the two qualifications. And the two qualifications which are on the sub-framework of Umalusi compare favorably. We also did an appraisal of the following subjects in the NCV, in the NSC, to ensure that we can do credit accumulation and transfer from the NSC to the NCV, because the curriculum of the two qualifications compare favorably. It is, you can actually transfer English first additional language, English home language, mathematical literacy, mathematics and physical sciences from the NSC to the NCV for you to complete the NCV. So those are the points that I want to make. They may overlap with the points that the DG wanted to make. Now, regarding the irregularities, the irregularities are in two major categories. They are technical irregularities. I'll just make an example of what I mean by technical. It is where a student is registered at the wrong level. The student wanted to register for English home language, but is registered at English first additional language. It is an irregularity on its own, but it is technical. And it can also go the other way around, that a student who's registered for English first additional language, at the point of writing, is given a question paper of English home language, and he proceeds and he writes the paper unaware that it is at a different level. Those are technical irregularities. There are many, but I'll just mention those two as an example. Cheating is a behavioral irregularity. I'm just going to mention them, and Umalusi is limited in this regard because we get these irregularities. We get the nature of the irregularity, we get the cases per province, we get the number of candidates involved per province. We don't go as deeply as going to which district. Maybe Dr. Polia will be able to shed light whether they're able to go that deep. But the list that I have here will indicate the province, how many cases per province, and how many candidates were involved per province. Possible assistance, the student was assisted, the student had crypt notes. I'm just going to mention a few. Cell phone in the examination room, group copying, a missing script, different handwritings on the same answer book, candidates with two scripts, candidate using a smartwatch in the examination, a student who is an imposter, a candidate is an imposter. He pretends that is Rakomisi, but it is somebody else writing on behalf of Rakomisi, tattooing the answers on the arm, and so forth and so on. There are many. I'll not be able to go through the list now. Or a candidate, for instance, using a pencil to give his or her answers. Having said that, the honorable member asked us to, honorable Christians, to give advice on what needs to be done with the shortage of staff in the provincial offices of the exams. My advice would be that there should be a work study done. The provinces have got that capability through the offices of the premiers to check the workload, and then the department, after doing the work study through the office of the premier, can create and fund posts. They must be created and funded by the individual provincial education departments. The reason why we emphasize these is because the people in exams, because of the nature of the work, they work long hours, and as a result, we are risking lives because people may face burnout as time goes on, and people may also commit errors that are very expensive for us in exams if they are that tired. And also, they have to drive long distances delivering question papers. We may have people dying as a result. So this is something that needs urgent attention. As for the rest of the other questions raised, my sense is that Dr. Poli has adequately responded to them. I don't need to repeat unless I'm omitting something. Then I could be alerted that I've omitted something that was directed at Umalusi. Thank you very much, Chairperson.
Thank you very much, Umalusi and the Department of Education. Is the DG still in the meeting? Maybe we can drop him for at least 2 minutes. Yes, Mr. Polia.
Yeah, Honorable Chair, I did get hold of the DG, and unfortunately, he is in one of the remote parts of KZN, and connectivity has let him down. He did indicate, oh, he's trying to connect.
Now.
Okay, go ahead.
I am better now, slightly better. Just one point, Chair. I just wanted to say the enrollment from 2019 to 2022 increased from 12.6 million to 13.4 million, which means that the notion of say 400,000 learners are lost in the system, as Dr. Polia correctly pointed out. We don't find it in our data nor in fact. That's the only point that I thought that I couldn't emphasize in my input. And the plans that have been requested by Honorable Christian and Honorable Baha will make them available to the office of the chair of the select committee. Thank you very much. My profuse apologies. I had to come to the national road N2 to get better connectivity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, DG, the department and the entire delegation of Umalusi. I think we should really appreciate your unwavering support for you to be always present in our meeting when the select committee is calling on you to engage and to check on the progress being made on various matters that select committee deems fit. I think it is at this stage that we will excuse the department so that members remain, so that we can deal with the internal matters of the select committee. Thank you very much, department and Umalusi. You may excuse us for now.
Thank you very
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, Chair.
Prof. And CEO. Thank you.
Bye.
I just want to confirm, Tando, is it only us that are here? Is everybody from department and Umalusi out?
I think there's still one or two from the department that are still with us, Chair.
Can the department and Umalusi please excuse us? I think our business with you is concluded. We just want to deal with matters of the committee. Let me just check on the participants who is here. Okay, it's out. I suggest, I think that we are okay now, Tando, right? Yeah, I think that everybody's out. Members, I think we've got to the item of the consideration of the draft minutes on the 15th of March. Can you flight them, please, Tando? And also to acknowledge the chairperson. I saw that he has since joined the meeting. You are welcome, chairperson. I'm sure members are still following the slides so that after here they can either confirm if this is the true reflection of the minutes. Thank you very much. May I kindly note hence members as an indication that these minutes are a true reflection of what transpired in our last day meeting. May I note hence for the adoption of the minutes. Member Ndungeni.
Thank you, Chair. I rise to adopt the minutes. Is the true reflection. Thank you,
very
Chair.
much. Member Ndungeni, can I get the seconder?
Honorable Chair.
Can I get the seconder? Yes.
Yeah, I second, Honorable Chair. It's because
No, thank you very much. Yeah, thank you very much, because I think the minutes of the 15th have been adopted and seconded by the latter members who have done so. Let me, at this stage, members, appreciate everybody who's in the meeting and say that we appreciate your efforts as part of our constitutional obligation to hold executive to account, particularly in this session where we interrogated both the reports of Department of Basic Education and Umalusi. And again, say thank you for the vote of confidence that you have shown today in me. I saw that Chairperson is here. Maybe before we close, Chairperson, do you want to say something?
Yeah, thank you very much, our members, and Zobe for holding the fort when I was in I've just landed from Russia now, and yeah, you did a very good job. I just connected and listened. Remember, we are monitoring the biggest budget in the country. That's worth billions and billions of rands. So we have to pay due diligence in checking how the funds are used and whether they are used for the purposes that they were meant for. But at the same time, to say the entities that report to us have done a very good job with the metric results. So they actually made us proud. And thanks to all of you. Thank you very much. I still need to recover from this long trip. I need some rest of some few hours. Thank you very much. Thanks, Enzo.
Thank you very much, Chairperson and members.
And the members, yeah.
Till we meet again, the meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Honorable.
Thank you, Honorable Chairperson.
Thank you. Bye.
Recording stopped.